Hello and welcome to another of Mr. Valentin's reviews for Hamlet. This is the second part of a two-part review. The first part was your to be or not to be speech with the Zaption enhancement, and this is going to go over the other portions of the test. So you should watch both of these videos if you want to make sure you understand exactly everything that's going to be on your test. So the to be or not to be speech is one, and this is the other. So let's get started. So the first part of your test that you're going to want to make sure that you know with 100% certainty are your literary terms. The literary terms we're going to break into two parts. So first part, literary terms that you want to make sure you know the proper definition to. Allusion, aside, comedic relief, comedy, euphemism, foreshadowing, Iambic Pentameter, allusion, imagery, metaphor, monologue, paradox, personification. Okay, so we're going to stop there because that's what I have room for on this screen. So these literary terms we've already had mostly a test on. There's a couple new ones, which include comedic relief and euphemism. So let's go over what some of these literary terms are. An allusion. What is an allusion? We know an allusion is a reference to a person, place, or thing. And this could be historical or literary. So for example, we might see an allusion to, a certain location. And that location could be maybe historical, such as it's as hot as the Sahara Desert. All right, so there you have an allusion to the Sahara Desert. But you may say, this place is as grand as Mount Olympus, which is a famous literary location. All right, so it could be either or. An aside, now, aside, don't get confused with soliloquy or monologue. An aside is when a character reveals private thoughts and the character is alone on stage. Or there are other characters on stage, pardon me. All right, so make sure you know that, yes, there can be other characters on stage for the aside. It's that kind of silent moment for the character where they speak to the audience. An aside can also happen between two characters and no one else can hear them. Another literary term, comedic relief. So this is one of our new literary terms. All right. And the comedic relief is an elevation in the tone of the play. That is, the play has gotten a little too grim, and so they put in kind of funny moments to make us not feel as depressed as we may be inclined to feel. A comedy. A comedy, the technical definition of a comedy, right, is that it ends in marriage. That's it. All right. So know that a comedy, right, ends in marriage. And we know Hamlet, not a comedy. We have a euphemism, all right, and that's a nicer way of saying something. So for instance, we talked about a couple examples in class. So rather than saying Ophelia kills herself, we may say she is collateral damage. We talked about how this extends to things such as cars. You don't buy used cars anymore. No one wants a used car. It sounds gross. All right. Instead, we buy certified pre-owned. All right. So a euphemism is just a nicer way of saying something. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing are hints at future events. They're usually fairly subtle. All right. That is, you can't explicitly see them, but sometimes not so much. Sometimes they're in your face. So hints at future events, all right? Such as Hamlet's death. Now, depending on when you're listening to this video, Hamlet may not have died. However, we knew from the beginning that Hamlet is going to die, and there's plenty of hints at that throughout the entire story. Iambic Pentameter. For Iambic Pentameter, we're going to say, all right, it's Shakespeare's characteristic verse. This is the way he writes his plays, and his sonnets for that matter. Right, we've analyzed a couple of his sonnets, all right, and they've all been written in Iambic Pentameter. An allusion is simply a falsified image. An image that's not really there. Imagery. Now, the definition of imagery varies depending on who you talk to. All right. For our purposes, imagery are images in the text that appeal to the senses. So that's to say that it can be auditory as well. All right. And in Shakespeare plays, they love to do auditory things. Not so much in Hamlet, but if we were to read King Lear, all right, we would see that when there's a thunderstorm, characters use onomatopoeia such as bang and smash and crack, all right, to simulate the storm. So that would be imagery as well. Usually it's very visual moments. A metaphor, not to be confused with a simile, a metaphor is a comparison that does not, let me bold that, use like or as. So, something akin to Hamlet is, I'm thinking of a special word for Hamlet. Hamlet is a tiger. Now, is he literally a tiger? No. All right, but that would be a metaphor. A monologue, a long uninterrupted speech. A paradox. There's several ways you can define paradox. You could just say it's a juxtaposition, but some people don't know what that means. It's placing two unlike ideas close together. Such as life and death. If you see those in the same line, you have most certainly paradox or juxtaposition or antithesis if we wanted to go further with it. And finally, personification. text here. Here we go. Personification. We'll say giving lifelike characteristics to non-living things. So giving lifelike characteristics to non-living things. All right, so these are those literary terms A through P. Well, let's continue on. So after personification, we want to make sure we add in pun, simile, soliloquy, tragicomedy, and tragedy. All right, a pun is a play on words. All right, usually some type of terrible joke. Hamlet says to his father, "I am in the sun." All right, and he plays on the word sun because he's talking about him being outside, but he also uses the word son, all right, because he is now King Claudius's son because he's his uncle, nephew thing. A simile, a comparison using like or as. That one's simple, we know that. Soliloquy, all right, don't get this confused with the side, all right. When a character reveals private thoughts and is alone on stage. A tragicomedy ends in either death or marriage, and sometimes both. Suddenly I can't spell marriage. There we go. Just both. Alrighty. And finally, a tragedy simply ends in death, which is what we're currently reading. Alright, so those are your main literary terms for the first section of your test. However, there are 5, 6 other literary terms we haven't gone over, so let's do that on the next page. The plot diagram. So you need to know your plot diagram as usual. So when we go to do the plot diagram, all right, you need to know what each section is called by the literary terms we are using in class. So we wouldn't call the first part the introduction. We would call the first part the exposition. And you also have to know the technical definitions of these words. So the exposition is where we find out the setting and meet the characters. And that goes here. And for Hamlet, we should know, all right, and any Shakespeare play for that matter, that the exposition is associated with Act 1. We have this dotted line, all right, going here. And so what do we know this dotted line as? This dotted line is the inciting incident, and it's when the moment the story moves forward, all right, and the plot can progress. So I'm just going to shrink this down, all right, kind of put it on the dotted line. We have this line going up, and we know that this is the complication. We do not use the term rising action in this class because we're trying to elevate our vocabulary, and the complication are the events leading to the climax, all right, where the story quite literally becomes more complicated. Cool. All right, at the very top, right up here, we have the climax. The climax is defined as the highest point of action. going down, right here, we have the denouement, or what people refer to as the denouement. Depends on how French you want to be about it. All right, and the denouement, all right, is the tidying up of loose ends, all right, and the events leading to the resolution. All right. And we'll get into what that is for our story. Finally, at the very, very end, we have the resolution. Again, not the complication, or not the conclusion, the resolution. And the resolution is where the story concludes, all right, where the story ends, so to speak. All right. Again, we're using the terminology for class. All right. So you want to know these, and you want to know what act each one is associated with. All right. So the complication is associated with Act 2. I'm sure we can figure out the rest, but we shall do it together just in case. The climax is associated with Act 3. The denouement is associated with Act 4. And finally, the resolution at the very end is associated with Act 5. So you're going to need to know the technical definitions, which we've just gone over, but for the second part of your test, you're going to need to know where these events, what events occurred in them. So thankfully you have your anticipation guides. If you lost any of your anticipation guides, then you can download them from my website. All right, so again, if you need to access them because you lost them for whatever reason, what can you do? Go to my website. How do you get to my website? All right, so we're going to go to, forget that. All right, we go to www.lakelandschools.org. All right, and then you'll click the teacher sites. There we go, teacher sites. All right, and then type in my name. All right, so, and usually all you need to type in is the first 3 letters. Okay, if you lost them. So you want to review them. So for example, on your test, you will see something like meets Hamlet. So when do we meet Hamlet? And the answer is your exposition. If you see something like Polonius is killed, when did that happen? The climax. For our tidying up of loose ends, our denouement, when did that happen? That happened in the denouement. All right, so I'm not going to go over each and every one because you have them. All right, they're broken up by act, so you can easily study for this. Remember to review your to be or not to be speech. Remember, for your to be or not to be speech, you'll have blanks, so it'll say to be or not to be, that is the blank, and you will have to write in the blank. And then after that, you'll have analysis questions, all right, based on the to be or not to be speech that we've gone over and on the Zaption that you watched. For any other questions, all right, please come to Extra Help, or if you can't come to Extra Help, all right, you can email me at lakelandschools.org. Okay, so let's just move that to where we can see it. Just kidding, still can't manage to do it correctly. There we go. Ha! All right, so for any other questions, that's it. All right, email me, come to Extra Help, or ask in class. All right, good luck on your test. I'm sure you'll do fine. And that's it. Have a great day.